All right, let's go ahead and begin. I'm Dr. Kelly Maxwell Haer, and I direct the Relationship IQ program at Boone Center for the Family. The Boone Center is a center dedicated to um, training and others and providing resources to strengthen healthy relationships. We reach out to the church and the academic community, and Relationship IQ is just one of our programs. Relationship IQ, if you're not familiar, is a program dedicated to helping young adults strengthen healthy relationships. And we have a small group and large presentation curriculum covering several different relationship topics that are geared to help you as a leader of young adults work with young adults to strengthen healthy relationships. We cover topics including relationship with God, family, friends, dating, communication and conflict, boundaries, sex, and our newest topic is technology and relationships, which is what we're going to talk about today. Be sure to use the chat feature to ask a question. I'm planning to stop about midway through and I'll take some questions then, and then I'll also take questions at the end. So be sure to put your questions into the chat feature there. So in our conversation today, I'm going to offer you an understanding of some overarching dynamics related to technology and relationships that are general, that affect all of us. And then I will provide you an understanding of some dynamics when it comes to specifically working with young adults and helping them to navigate technology and relationships. And then our next topic will be to look specifically at how technology and relationships impacts young adult relationships with their friends, family, and with God. And this will be just a brief overview drawing from some of the material on technology and relationships that's found in our newest module, the technology and relationships curriculum. Again, it's a small group curriculum, and there's material for a large presentation there too. All right, let me skip forward in our slides. Whoop, here, there, whoop, there we go. Okay. An overarching dynamic when it comes to technology and relationships is something called connected presence. This is very prominent now during COVID, when we are more and more relying on technology to mediate relationships. But this idea of connected presence, which I'll explain, has been present to us before the time of COVID. And so the idea here is that because we have so many communication technologies, people come to expect others to use these technologies to mediate their relational presence during physical absence, such that there's a seamless web of communication between individuals when they're either in each other's physical presence or not. So for example, you can text, you can video call, you can communicate over social media, you can engage in gaming together online. There's so many different ways to do relationship through technology when you're not in each other's physical presence. And we call this web of communications connected presence. And again, people come to expect this because it's possible. Another note on the importance of this topic, it's particularly important now, again, in the time of COVID, when relationships are more and more mediated by technology. But also it's very important, as Jean Twenge's research demonstrates. So she did a study where she discovered that in 2012, the rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidality for young adults greatly increased. And she was mystified as to what was going on in 2012 that accounts for the great increase of young adults struggling when it comes to emotional health, anxiety, depression, and suicidality. And she discovered a correlation between the presence of the smartphone being in use by more than half of the young adults at this time. And so she explains that the use of technology by young adults appears to be associated with greater emotional health problems. So helping young adults learn to navigate and use technology well is a very important topic for those working with young adults. Okay. Something to keep in mind when helping young adults navigate their use of technology is you really want to empower young adults to think critically about how their technology is impacting their relationships. Instead of you just being in a position and saying, using too much technology around relationships, too much social media, too much texting is bad. It's better if you can help young adults to assess and evaluate how their use of technology is impacting their relationships. So in order to equip young adults to make these assessments, young adults need to have a sense of what actually makes a healthy relationship to begin with. What does a healthy relationship look like? So they need a framework for healthy relationships. Whoops, let me advance the slide there. There's three components of healthy relationships. The first is intimacy. And it's great to lead a conversation with young adults to say, what does it mean to be intimate in relationship? And of course, this isn't just physical sexual intimacy, but emotional intimacy where a person is known and loved in the good, bad, and ugly of who they are, that there's a level of authenticity in the knowing. It's important for young adults and relationships to experience something that's called secure attachment. Secure attachment is characterized by availability, responsiveness, and engagement. Availability that people can reach each other, responsiveness, they respond to each other, and engagement, they initiate or reach out to each other. Secure attachment is also characterized by playfulness, love, acceptance, curiosity, empathy, truthfulness, and challenge. The result of a secure attachment is that the relationship is characterized by greater trust, peace, and stability, a lack of anxiety in the relationship. Interdependence is another feature of healthy relationships. So instead of being codependent, overly relying on a person to fix, save, or rescue them in life, interdependence is characterized by a person relying on another person in a healthy way where they do what they can for themselves, but then they also reach out for support and help in particularly challenging situations or where they clearly need help. So again, it's important for young adults to have a framework to understand healthy relationships. And there's a lot more that can be said about intimacy, secure attachment, and interdependence, and that is found in the technology and relationships curriculum. So we'll leave it there for right now. Also, when you're working with young adults on this topic, it's important that you talk to them about the good that technology brings to relationships. There can be a tendency to just focus on what's bad, but young adults will be more open to hearing if you start with what is good. Just a simple example, technology makes us much more available. Remember, available is a part of a secure attachment. We can reach and connect to each other through text, social media, etc. And that's really helpful. In my own story, there was one February when I was living in St. Louis, and I was single at the time, and I needed a roommate all of a sudden, kind of out of the blue. Generally, February is not a good month for trying to find a roommate. Many people are not moving at that time. So I put a post on Facebook, and lo and behold, someone from a previous small group at church saw my post. I hadn't talked to him in quite a time, and he shared my information with an intern at his workplace who was just offered a full-time job. And he thought that she and I would make great roommates. And long story short, that happened. So it was all because of my being more available through Facebook that I ended up with a great roommate situation. So you can think of your own stories to share with young adults about how technology has really helped you relationally. So it's helpful to start with the good. Another dynamic to consider, advance the slide here. Oh, seems to be doing two at a time. There we go. These are overarching dynamics, the alone together dynamic. And this is coined by Sherry Turkle. She wrote a book called Alone Together. And I'll explain this dynamic that happens because of technology. So when young adults are together with a group of friends, as you see pictured, the young adult sitting on the couch, they can end up being alone because their energy, their attention, and their focus is actually given to relationships or gaming on their cell phone or iPad or computer, and they're actually not connecting with each other relationally despite being in each other's physical presence. So they wind up alone when they're together. The opposite is also true, what I'm about to describe, and it's especially true in this time of COVID. So when we are physically alone, social distancing, less time in the flesh with our friends, when we're physically alone, we can wind up together with our friends connecting through social media, text, phone calls, etc. And on one hand, this can be really good, though on the other hand, our alone time can be disrupted where we don't learn how to do aloneness and solitude well, that young adults can feel like they need to be connected with others kind of at every moment versus learning how to be alone in a healthy way. So the alone together dynamic, again, functions in two different ways, and it's prominent because of technology. All right, let's leave that topic there. And I'm going to pause right now for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kelly. So we just have one question that has come up we would love to hear from you about. We've had someone ask, do you think that this material is helpful to go through with teens? Ideally, this is within a parent and teen sort of dynamic rather than a youth leader. How do you think that fits for the relationship IQ material?
Okay, let me see if I understand the question correctly. It sounds like the question is around what does it look like for a parent in conversation with a young adult as opposed to a youth leader? Is that right?
Yeah, so you've mentioned a little bit about the curriculum, but would you say that it would be helpful or appropriate for a parent to talk about these things with their teens?
Yes, absolutely. A parent could purchase the curriculum, read through the material, and become very familiar with the topics, and then from that familiarity, lead conversations, bring up different topics with their young adult, very much, in a discussion framework more than a lecture, here's what you need to know, but learning to engage their young adult child on these topics. So it could be useful, yes.
Great. Now we're having a few more questions come in, and we encourage you to continue using the Q&A section to do so throughout. Kelly, how are you feeling? Would you like to do some of these we're going to answer some questions at the end. And so I think there's just one more that might be a good one to catch.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do another question. That sounds great.
Okay, so could you mention the name of the researcher that you referenced earlier who spoke about the cell phone effect on young adults?
Yes, Jean Twenge, Twenge. And she wrote a book called iGen, and you'll find that research in that book, iGen by Jean Twenge.
All right, great. Well, we will continue to look at questions at the end. We know you have a little bit more that you'd like to share with us, so thank you.
Great. Okay, so let's shift now and talk about how technology impacts specific young adult relationships, looking at relationship with friends. As we know from the Bible, there's an overarching storyline of the Bible that can be summarized in 4 main points: creation, fall, redemption, glory. In simple terms, we know that God created all things good, and then the fall came, sin, brokenness entered the world, and the goodness was disrupted. And then Jesus returns to restore and build back our relationship with God and to start redemption and other dimensions of life that were impacted by the fall. And then finally, we will be with him eventually in glory when Jesus returns. finally. So to take that framework and consider how that plays out with technology in relationship with friends. And view of creation, technology inherently is not bad. We can actually say technology is good. It's a matter of how it's used. So the fall in technology in relationship with friends, what can happen is that relationships can become very image-based or appearance-focused because of technology, specifically social media. I know this is not something new to you. This idea that relationships become shallow, image-focused, Photoshop is used, students take tons and tons of pictures to try to get just the right one to post on Facebook, Instagram, etc. So it can be helpful to have a conversation with young adults about this phenomenon and ask them, why do you think this is? Why do you think people are drawn to showcase a perfected image? Why do you think social media becomes so appearance focused? And part of the discussion can consider how just as Adam and Eve's reaction to their brokenness and their sin was to hide and to cover themselves, we carry this sense of shame in our hearts today. And thus young adults can have this impulse to cover or hide what they see as imperfect in themselves and try to appear perfect among their friends, in a way to try to get approval or acceptance. We all long for relationship. And so if we think, oh, I need to be perfect, I need to hide and cover in order to have friends to get acceptance, it makes sense. There's a lot of understanding to be had around why social media can become so appearance focused. So we want to understand kind of the fall, what is wrong, how technology negatively impacts relationship with friends. Next, it's important to find a better way forward because technology is not going to go away. We need to find ways to help young adults steward it well. I mentioned earlier, we talked about secure attachments, that they're characterized by curiosity. And so instead of young adults settling for the appearance-focused images, they can use to apply curiosity to the pictures and images that they do see online posted by their friends as a way to enter into the internal world, the world of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, ideas, and values of their friends. So let me give you a for instance. If somebody posted a really cute picture about their new puppy, a friend could see that picture and say, hey, tell me about your interest in having a dog, or tell me about how you're hopeful your puppy is going to impact your life. What has been your favorite moment with your dog so far? How has your dog been really helpful to you? Have there been any challenges? Basically taking the picture and going deeper. Or if someone posts a picture of a birthday party, taking the moment to ask the person, what did you learn this year? Since your last birthday, what challenges have you faced? Have you been surprised about your life in any way? What's been particularly exciting or good that you wouldn't have expected? What's been disappointing or challenging? So helping young adults think about how they can apply curiosity to go deeper with the surface image-focused images that they might find on social media. Also encouraging young adults to walk through what I call the truthfulness test before posting a picture, to ask themselves, does the picture I'm about to post fairly portray the reality of what happened? Or is the caption that I'm about to write under my photo fairly portray the reality of what happened? So let me give you a for instance. I was working with a young adult and she shared that she had gone to her sorority formal and she posted this picture that looked like, she was having a great time with her date. And she said, we left it all out on the dance floor, indicating that they just had the time of their lives and it was a lot of fun. And she shared with me that she said, the reality, Kelly, was that I left crying. It was a really hard night between a friend and I that we got in a fight and I felt really hurt. So she acknowledged that she posted that picture in a way that really misportrayed the reality of her experience. Now, the answer doesn't have to be, she didn't need to share that, on social media that that was a terrible evening, but making it a point not to proactively misportray something that happened, but to consider the truthfulness of what an image suggests. I'm going to leave that topic, relationship with friends, here for the sake of time and keep moving. So let me click over. Considering relationship with family. Again, you want to help young adults consider what is the fall, what is the brokenness, and how technology can negatively impact relationship with families. One key theme is around what I call social media secrecy. That often young adults will feel like they need to hide their social media pages from parents who are wanting access. They want to friend them on Facebook, they want to follow them on Instagram, etc. And there becomes tension and conflict over parents' access to young adult social media. And it can be helpful to allow young adults to consider and appreciate why their parents might want to be connected to them. Specifically, that parents long for relationship with their children. They long for their children to be available to them. Again, we talked about secure attachment being characterized by availability. So the parents' desire for relationship and for their young adults to be available can be validated by the young adult. The young adult can appreciate where they're coming from. And at the same time, a young adult might be able to explain to their parent how the reality is that social media, Instagram, tends to function as a hangout space, just as if a group of young adults were hanging out at the mall or something like that, and they might not want their parents to be present with them. But that's part of why a young adult might not want their parents to follow them. Maybe they're not so much trying to hide something, but it just feels like it's a hangout space with their friends. So young adults can help diminish the conflict of this dynamic by proactively choosing to share pictures that they post on social media with their parents separately, versus having them follow them. And also young adults can remind parents that the reality of what is shared on social media tends to be much more surface-based, and not the richness of communication that they actually long for with their children. That deeper relationship tends to happen offline. Okay, so a better way forward, redeeming relationships in the family with technology. How can young adults use group text, video calls, and pictures to foster intimacy in their family? Group text can be a really helpful way to support connection among family, particularly when young adults are living in different spaces around the country and college or beyond. In terms of, I'm going to shift kind of topic a little bit here. We talked about the value of interdependence when it comes to healthy relationships. Sometimes technology can position young adults to be overly dependent on input from their family. So their parent is always a phone call or a text away, where they can quickly reach out for help that they might actually not necessarily need that help from their parent. So help young adults identify, when are they reaching out to their parents for help that they would be better served to think through themselves. So I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine at Pepperdine shared about a time that she was going through the advising process, the academic advising process with a student, and the student stopped and called their parent in the midst of that advising session, kind of this knee-jerk reaction that mom or dad will know best how to help here, versus considering that their advisor might be most helpful here in their own thoughts about what their academic plans are. So better to help the young adult to think through a decision, form a preliminary opinion plan or decision, and then reach out for help from mom and dad. All right, I'm gonna leave this conversation here. And I think actually for the sake of time, because I wanna respect your time and have us done here at the 30-minute mark, we are going to skip technology and relationship with God, which is found in the manual. There's a lot of awesome dynamics to explore there. The technology and relationships manual also explores technology and relationship in the context of dating relationship, and technology and relationship in the context of relationship with self, which we don't often think about, the fact that we have our relationship with ourself. So much more to be found in the module. But I hope our brief conversation today is helpful for you to consider the reality of connected presence, that because technology exists, we come to expect this seamless web of communication with each other, and that you're aware of the pitfalls of the alone together dynamic, that technology can take us away from each other even when we're in each other's physical presence, and it can take us away from relationship with ourself when we're alone and we use it to reach out to others kind of too much or constantly. As you work with young adults, again, you want to lead with ways that technology is helpful, help them to evaluate, is my use of technology helping to foster a healthy relationship or not, in view of secure attachment, intimacy, and interdependence. All right, let's pause here. And April, what other questions might we have?
Kelly, thank you so much. We are getting such good feedback from everyone who's attending today, just for how timely this is and how helpful your presentation has been. So thank you. We have a few really good questions that have come in. One is about back to the teen dynamic with parenting.
Yes.
How do we assess whether our teens are learning to handle solitude and alone time appropriately?
That's a great question. I think even through observation around how much of the time does it seem like they're constantly on their phone or other technological device, does it seem like they can be by themselves, say, just reading, or even if they're traveling in the car with you, do they feel this constant need to pick up their device and be on it? When they're in, let's say, grandparents are around or other people are visiting your home, do they feel like they have to be on their phones? Like being aware of how much drive they have to connect digitally could be an indicator of whether or not they can handle kind of good, healthy alone time with themselves. It's a good question.
Observation is one, we just always kind of forget how useful that can be to us, huh? On a similar note, do you have any handouts for some of the assessments, such as the truthfulness test and others that you alluded to during the presentation?
Great question. The truthfulness test and some of the other redemption tips are found in the technology and relationships curriculum as activities and discussion questions, and there are some handouts embedded within the curriculum itself. So that would be a way to get that material.
Great, and we'll go ahead and send out that link in response to that in just a moment. Another question, how do you cultivate a willingness in teens to actually interact face-to-face and self-regulate with putting in some of these limits on their cell phones or video game time?
So the question of how to help young adults be more interested in face-to-face time than just technology.
Yeah, how do we encourage them to kind of take ownership of that and want that for themselves,
right,
rather than just someone else telling them to?
Yeah, because I could imagine that if it's something that as a parent or a young adult leader is just kind of harping on, like, you need to spend more time face-to-face with friends, that it'd be easy for a young adult to tune that out and be disinterested or push against that. That I would say leading with questions and exploration around, what is it like when you connect online? What do you like about that? What do you not like about that? What do you like about face-to-face connection? What do you not like about that? What's challenging about face-to-face connection? And even acknowledging that face-to-face connection is harder. It requires more of you. You're kind of more in the moment or on the spot in those relationships. And that might be uncomfortable for someone who doesn't have a lot of practice in face-to-face relationships. So creating space to help young adults name, the good, the bad, what is comfortable or uncomfortable for them. And then again, considering considering more about what are the benefits of face-to-face conversation and the richness of being together, but allowing them to really answer those questions and see the goodness of face-to-face relationships themselves versus just being so direct or straightforward about it.
Thank you. We have another question that is related to technology during the time of coronavirus. So you have probably heard the perspective that's out there a lot of times where technology is really only a problem if we're using it in substitution for our in-person interactions. But what about now? What about now where we don't have that option anymore and it's like we're forced to use technology?
Right. I think it's helpful to have a conversation around the different modes of technology and what they afford relationally or not in terms of text, video call, phone call, talk about the pitfalls of each, and even acknowledge that, video calls allow for greater connection, but they do come sometimes at a greater cost, that it can be very draining to be in front of a screen for a long time, that the brain is used to being able to see facial expression at a much higher level than video calls afford. And so our brains are working harder to kind of fill in those gaps. And that can be tiring versus sometimes a phone call can be actually a better option to have a variety of both resources. Yeah, so considering kind of what the different modes of communication allow and their pros and cons, and using them in variety.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. That's such a helpful answer to just remember that there are other, just all of the ways that we can do besides, emailing or texting, calling. Just remember that we still do have some options. Well, we are out of time, so thank you all who have submitted your questions. They've just provided such a great, rich discussion. Kelly, any last announcements?
Yes, also wanted to mention the upcoming Relationship IQ Leaders Training on September 17th and 18th. This is a 2-day training that I will host, and the training will cover young adult development, presentation skills, small group skills when working with young adults, as well as the Relationship IQ topics. And this will be available by Zoom. Would love to have you there. The training costs $250, though I'm going to offer you a coupon code right now for $50 off the training if you are interested. That code is RIQ-TECH-2020. I think, April, if you'll put that in the chat so folks will have access to that code if they'd like to sign up for the Relationship IQ Leaders Training. We'll cover so much of the Relationship IQ content during that time. Looking at young adults' relationship skills outside of how they manage and steward technology and relationship. So thank you all so much for attending today, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have other questions or comments or want to understand more about how Relationship IQ might help your ministry to young adults. Thanks so much.